So Ryan gets flown out to L.A. by a friend. No one really knows who this guy is, but when he's in L.A., he decides he's going to take a trip to Vegas. Rents a car, drives out to Vegas, and on his way back, he knows he doesn't have enough money for gas. So he calls his mom, calls a friend, gets some money, but still runs out of gas on this Highway 15, somewhere in this area, on the way back to L.A. So he's on the side of the road looking for help. California Highway Patrol finds him, picks him up, then they go looking for his car, and they can't find it. Why are they having trouble, difficulty locating his car if you're here in the middle of nothing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Vinny. So what we have here, this is Baker.
There's nothing here.
There's not much. As you can see, this is desolate desert area. This over here is Interstate 15. And ultimately, his vehicle is located, but it's located 3 miles northwest of the Holloran Springs exit, which is a little bit off of our map over here. But what they do find is the California Highway Patrol actually finds Ryan walking along Interstate 15. A patrolman picks him up and spends some time with him going up and down this area looking for his vehicle. Never finds it. Why? Because ultimately it is found 3 miles northwest. The only conclusion that I can form is that they just never went far enough south.
Didn't go far enough to track it.
Now ultimately, the patrolman drops him off at this ARCO station, again, off of Interstate 15 in Baker. The ARCO station is right here, and then we later know where his remains are found, and we'll get to that.
So he's at the ARCO station. I'm looking at it here, and I mean, again, there's not a lot of things. This guy's 6'4", and suddenly is at the ARCO station, then is gone, disappears, because he calls his friend from the ARCO station to pick him up. But he's got to drive from LA, so it takes a few hours to get out there. Gets out there, no one knows where he is. How does someone just disappear in an area like this where you have so few places to go?
I don't know. And the curious thing about this is that there's nowhere to hide, there's nowhere to even seek shade other than some kind of man-made structure. And to give you an indication as to how hostile this environment is, they've actually got the world's tallest thermometer right here. That gives you an indication. We're in the middle of the Mojave Desert here, right on the edges of what's referred to as Death Valley, probably one of the most inhospitable areas in the United States.
In the summer?
In the summer. Yeah, average temperature in July then, 108 per day.
Wow.
All right, so he somehow disappears, and to me that's part of the mystery here is why would he even leave the ARCO station? Maybe you'll go somewhere to get something to eat, but why would you wander anywhere? Because let's get to what you're talking about, Charles, which is where his body is found somewhere off of this road. It's Silver Lane. Here's the actual road, but it's up here. It's about 1.5 miles from the ARCO station and the AM/PM convenience store, and he's found 200 feet?
200 yards, I believe. 200 yards off of Silver Lane. He's found by a couple of guys that are going on a hike, and ultimately that's where the remains are found. So you can see the distance from this ARCO station. And again, it's a cold case. It is, however, still an open case with the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office.
Here's the terrain, okay? This is the terrain of what is off of Silver Lane. Why would anyone go there?
I don't know. It's
by himself.
Yeah, it's like a moonscape, isn't it? There's literally, you see real low growth scrub vegetation there. You don't see any trees standing out. You're not going to find that kind of shelter in that kind of environment. And I have to think that someone that was in their right mind would have the ability to say, hey, you know what, this is probably not healthy for me. I don't need to be out in this area. And then we can only speculate at that point. What was he thinking? Why would any right-thinking person just wander out into this area where they're going to succumb to this environment?
And again, obviously we are purely speculating. Open case, we don't have a whole lot of information, right? The authorities aren't sharing statements with us. They're not sharing a lot at this point.
No.
That's correct. But one thought is, maybe he gets a ride here at the ARCO station. Maybe somebody picks him up. Maybe somebody else is going to help him locate his vehicle. But maybe he's in an altered state. We know from the autopsy there's a possibility there, and I know we'll get into that. But perhaps he gets a ride, somebody takes him along, and maybe he starts acting in a bizarre fashion and they just dump him off right here on Silver Lane or nearby. That's one possibility. We just don't know if he had some sort of secondary contact with somebody else who also was assisting him in some fashion, and that maybe went wrong.
You were mentioning 108 degrees, middle of summer, right? What if he walks this distance? You're walking a couple miles. I mean, is that hot enough? Are those conditions brutal enough that somehow you could become disoriented just by walking a couple of miles?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's going to set in if you're not properly hydrated is dehydration. When he was found clothed. He had shorts on, I believe. He had a shirt on. The remains did. There's no indication he had a hat on or anything like that, and there was no water containers near the body. But again, we're talking 2 months downrange from when he was last seen, when the body was found. So yeah, there's if he is disoriented, this would only be further exacerbated by heat and dehydration.
All right, so when the body is found, months later, the organs are missing. And this became a big issue for Ryan's mom, because she gets a phone call saying, listen, we found your son, but he's really not in good shape. The organs are missing. And it wasn't clear to her at that point what state the remains were in. She didn't know if the remains were in a good state and just the organs were missing. How can that be explained? And is there anything in the autopsy or anywhere else that explains how his organs would be missing or why?
Yeah, the forensic pathologist for this particular county did the autopsy, and one of the things that is found in the autopsy report is that the forensic pathologist states that a few of the ribs are missing. All right?
So he says the ribs are missing in the autopsy. We have the autopsy up here.
Yeah, we do. He actually states that there are a couple of ribs missing. People have speculated on how do the organs go missing in this case, Vin?
Right.
And the idea is any kind of predator, any kind of scavenger that is out there in the desert. You got coyotes, you've got all kinds of birds of carrion that are out there, these types of things. They're going to seek out an area that's loaded in protein. They're going to want to go for the abdomen. There are no bones that are protecting our abdomen, okay? And they're talking about feasting activity of animals and this sort of thing. If they can get open the abdomen, they're going to begin to eat the abdomen, eat all of the contents in the abdomen, the bowel, the liver, the kidneys, which are missing, they allude to the lungs and the heart. All of that stuff is protein rich. These animals are wanting it. My suspicion is it's a high likelihood this could be coyotes. Another interesting thing.
Well, here's the thing about coyotes. Something else people have talked about. If it was coyotes, wouldn't the bones and everything be scattered everywhere and difficult to find?
No, he was still intact. But there's no, and one of the curious things that the pathologist says in the autopsy report is that there's no indication of surgical intervention in this case. And what that means, because there's a lot of stuff that's floating around on the internet right now about illegal harvestation of organs.
Absolutely.
If that's going to be a procurement event, first off, you have to have a viable way to source the organs, and they would be surgically removed. That means that you would have to have smooth margins that indicates that a scalpel has opened the body. There's no indication of that. As a matter of fact, there's little or no tissue that's left on the outside of the body. Let's keep in mind, when they got his remains, the totality of the weight of the body was only 50 pounds, and that was with clothing.
So let's get to this autopsy, because you look at here at the end. This is the big stuff, right? Cause of death undetermined due to advanced decomposition. Manner of death undetermined.
Right.
What is needed in this case to get to some determination? Is it going to be, do we need some sort of video surveillance? Do we need a witness who comes forward? Is there something scientific that can be done further in this case to get some determination as to what happened and why it happened?
You know, to me, the whole autopsy, there's nothing that is really nefarious about this. This seems to be to bear out a situation where you have somebody who expired from natural causes in the desert, and then unfortunately the remains were interfered with, consumed to some extent by animal activity.
You say that, but the unanswered question I think a lot of people have is, he's dropped off in a safe place here waiting for his friend. Why would he be here and end up over here? How does he get from here to here? What is the explanation that makes sense here?
There's one thing out of the autopsy that we know from the toxicology
Okay.
And
Right down
and
here.
Joseph Scott Morgan is best positioned to elaborate on his interpretation of this. But we know there's
Read that to me. Read that to me.
Well, it says decomposed brain was sent for toxicology. While the screening ELISA test for amphetamines was presumed positivity, no amphetamines were detected using gas chromatography or mass spectrometry.
Yes, spectrometry.
And so
Mass spec.
we've talked about this, and again, Joseph, why don't you elaborate on how they came to that sort of conclusion?
To me, that's inconsistent, right?
Right.
On the one side, you're saying there's a test that says yes, and there's another test that says no.
Well, it's more like maybe. And here's the rub. The body has been in a decomposing state for 2 months in one of the worst, most harsh environments in the United States of America. Okay, it's going to compromise any tissue you have left. They're very fortunate that there was actually some brain tissue left, and we can go more into that as well. But there was actually some semblance of brain matter that was left in the cranial vault that they were able to harvest out of there at the examination. And what they will do is, in the absence of everything else, in a perfect world, we would want blood, we would want maybe a sample of liver, these sorts of things. But with the brain, that's all we have, okay? They take the brain, they put it in a big centrifuge, a lot of people have seen these at home, and they spin it down almost liquefied, and then they'll draw a sample off of that. But the sample is so compromised right now, they're saying, well, it looks like that amphetamine may or may not be there. It's the only thing that they got hit on, because they screen for things like opiates.
Everything else was negative.
Cannabinoids.
And let's not forget the observations of the Highway Patrol. Trained professionals said did not appear to be under the influence of any drugs or
Yeah, back
alcohol.
at Charles here, because I got to tell you, for me, I want to talk to this cop. That's who I want to press.
I mean, we don't know anything about the cop. We don't know about the cop's breadth of experience, how long he's been on the highway patrol, what sort of training he
But if
has.
someone is like spacing out, you're going to know it, right?
Well, but
there's certain
at
people
one
that
stage.
if you're tripping on some sort of drug, it's going to be very obvious, isn't it?
Not necessarily, and at the time when this officer came in contact with Ryan, he may have been in one particular state of mind. But after extreme heat, 108 degrees, dehydration sets in. I mean, his state can be even further altered. One of the things that speaks to me is, listen, he should have some sense as to where he left his car, right?
Yeah.
If he doesn't have some sense, then he's in a truly altered state, right? Yeah. So he would know it's off of Interstate 15 somewhere. And if he knows it's off of Interstate 15, then why would he even be venturing off in this direction by foot? To me, that points to one of two things. Either he was truly disoriented and he made his way completely in the opposite direction of the interstate, or someone else picked him up, was assisting him in some way, or maybe there's something more nefarious associated with who picked him up and why they were heading in that direction and what may have occurred. Now, as far as nefarious, there's nothing about what we know from the autopsy that would point to a gunshot wound or an incised wound or something like that may have contributed to his death.
Yeah.
So, that leaves a big question mark. It seems like,
Let's bottom line it now. Let's bottom line it. I mean, it's undetermined now. Do you believe that this thing can be solved, that there can be an answer for Ryan's mom from investigators in this case as to what happened to her son?
From the scientific standpoint, I think that we've gone as far as the road can take us at this point. They have examined the remains. Not only has a forensic pathologist examined the remains, but also a forensic anthropologist has examined the remains. There was no sign of trauma. The only thing that they note as real trauma to Ryan's remains is a skull fracture. But both the forensic pathologist and the forensic anthropologist both state clearly that this is probably a post-mortem event. That means after death, and that's as a result of the drying or desiccation that takes place in the bone. Bones became brittle. There's no evidence of trauma at this point with what we have remaining. All the soft tissue is gone, Ben. There's no evidence of hemorrhage, all those sorts of things that we look for. We're left high and dry. So I'd have to defer to good old-fashioned shoe leather as far as the cops are concerned with this case.
I mean, we have the expert telling us we're at the end of that road as far as the scientific side. So really what it leaves is, some possible testimonial evidence. Maybe there's a witness or two out there that saw him get picked up. that saw him interact with somebody that may be able to shed some light on what happened after that California highway patrolman dropped him off there, right? So to me, the likelihood that we get some clarity, some sort of resolution to this case, sadly, and I say sadly for the family, for Ryan's mom especially, it seems remote at best at this point. But if it were to occur, I think it's going to be in the form of a witness that comes back. Now, we're talking 2013. A lot of time has passed. This is a small town out in the desert. I mean, we're not talking about it, a metropolitan
so I think
city here.
the only way we may get an answer here is if there's more publicity about this case, and maybe someone remembers something or feels obligated to come forward. I think that's the only way.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.